An entire lifetime lived out in a matter of minutes. A lost civilization now turned into only memories that aren't yours, but now, somehow, they are. On the surface, nothing has changed, but below the surface, the soul perhaps has gained something of an inner light. It's back to Star Trek The Next Generation this week for another round with our old friend Jean-Luc Picard.
What is this place?
In, as you've probably already guessed, the Season 5 all-time classic, The Inner Light. Resican flutes at the ready. A lot of people requested this one. Welcome back to Sci-Fi Wire's Warp Factor Classic Blend. Engage! Prepare for mission briefing! This episode first aired in 1992, but if you haven't seen it, then it's new to you. All crew to spoiler stations, but because 1992, yellow alert! The Enterprise D encounters a strange probe in space, and it sends out a nucleonic beam directly to Picard. He faints and wakes up to discover a woman he doesn't know calling him Kamin. Jean-Luc quickly deduces he's not on the holodeck, he's not on the Enterprise at all.
What is this place?
Everyone in this unfamiliar place seems to know him, all of them calling him Kamin. The woman that he woke up to is his wife, Eileen. The place is called Resik, and the planet is Catan. Kamin is an iron weaver who is also attempting to master the art of the Resican flute. This world has never had any contact with the larger galaxy, even though Eileen has a necklace that looks just like the probe.
Where did you get this?
Hours have now passed for Picard Kamin, but only seconds have passed on the Enterprise in some kind of weird Narnia time thing, where Dr. Crusher discovers insane neurological activity going on within Picard.
But neurotransmitter production is off the scale. What's going on?
In a blink, 5 years have passed for Picard, who is now living Kamin's life. He begins to speak up as a member of the community, while Data, back on the Enterprise, works on a way to sever the probe's connection. Kamin and Eileen start to plan for a family. Before we know it, Kamin and Eileen are naming their second child. Kamin then faints because Picard's connection to the probe has been severed. Dr. Crusher has Data re-establish it right quick in order to save Picard. 10 years later, really fast, Kamin and his daughter Maribor find that radiation from Catan's sun is sterilizing the soil, and this is bad news for the planet as a whole. Maribor also has a suitor interested in her, and Kamin tells her to live in the moment. LaForge has tracked the probe to the Catan system by this point and finds no planets that can sustain life because its star went nova over 1,000 years ago. Curiouser and curiouser. The aging Kamin discovers that the planet is doomed. He argues for all to evacuate and send Superman to Earth. Sorry, that's not right. All to evacuate, but they do not have the means. There is another way to preserve their culture that is being developed, though. Soon after this, Eileen dies a natural death. Kamin is now an old man playing with his grandson. He goes to view the launching of something, but he has no idea what is actually being launched.
You know about it, Father. You've already seen it.
Seen it? What are you talking about?
All of the people that Kamin has encountered in his life start to reappear at this point, telling him that they are launching the very probe that the Enterprise encounters. They hoped that the probe would find a teacher, someone who could tell others about this civilization which has been gone for 1,000 years. Picard was the one that the probe found. A missile launches with the probe within it, right as Eileen says to Kamin,
Now we live in you. Tell them of us, my darling.
With that, Jean-Luc Picard wakes up on the bridge of the Enterprise. The entire life that he just lived happened within 25 minutes. Riker delivers a box to Picard that was found aboard the probe that is now shut down. Inside is Kamin's flute. Picard emotionally clutches it to him and then plays it.
Look at his eyes uncovered!
Does the inner light have plenty of secrets and references residing within? Does Captain Sisko have some serious pipes?
The best is yet to come a day of mine.
Oh boy, never get tired of that. A big yes to both questions, especially the second one. This episode began with series writer Michael Piller in season 4, who liked the notion of Picard living an unlived life. Many concepts were attempted by the writers to pull this idea off, but all of them failed. Writer Morgan Gendel finally pitched the idea of a probe beaming an interactive scenario into a crew member. The pitch also included an anti-war message. It showed a society ravaged by war, and the probe pretty much said, hey, don't make the same mistake. Don't do this. Don't be us. The writing staff realized that they finally had a way to pull off Piller's idea. Piller worked with Gendel, and the episode would lose the anti-war angle pretty much altogether, well, absolutely altogether, and more or less transform into what we have now. Piller wanted less emphasis on what was happening on the Enterprise, however, and more about what was happening to Picard living the life of Kamin. Regular Trek writer Peter Allen Fields revised the script and had to compress much of Kamin's already compressed life. So we flash forward a lot, and that's in the nature of the episode. This episode lives on in the life of Picard, notably in the form of the Resican flute. It appears in a deleted scene in Star Trek Nemesis, and this would suggest that the flute made it out from the wreckage of the Enterprise D unscathed, just like the photo album. The tune that Kamin plays on it for his son is the same that Picard plays at episode's end. This same melody was used again by Jeff Russo as the basis for the main theme of Star Trek Picard. Series writer Ronald D. Moore notes that nobody realized how big an effect an event like this would have on someone. They were aiming to make a good episode of the series and didn't realize that they were in the middle of creating one of Trek's finest hours. According to Moore, they did attempt to follow this episode up somewhat with the season 6 episode Lessons, where the flute and Picard's playing of it made a return, as did another member of Picard's love life circle. The Inner Light sees Picard playing Frere Jacques on the flute, which is the song he used to comfort frightened children earlier in the season in the episode Disaster. It worked. He did a good job there. Patrick Stewart has said that this episode gave him the greatest acting challenge that he'd had in his 7 years on this series. It paid off because it is one of the most popular Trek installments of all time. It was a favorite of Michael Piller and is a favorite of Picard showrunner Michael Chabon. It was in the top 5 episodes chosen for the Star Trek The Next Generation Viewer's Choice Marathon, which is where I first watched it. It's where I first saw it. Good memories. And it routinely ranks very high on all-time Best of Trek lists. It won a Hugo Award in 1993, as well as an Emmy for makeup effects. Yes, the makeup effects here are fantastic, but I agree with longtime Trek makeup wizard Michael Westmore when I say that Patrick Stewart himself should have won an Emmy for his work here, for many episodes actually. If you ask me, and you haven't, this is one of the most interesting ways that the show went about showing us a strange new world and a new civilization. And the true lasting power of the episode is shown by how often other sci-fi properties riff on the premise. Though Piller's concept of the unlived life was not entirely new to science fiction, this episode certainly cements it, at least in terms of modern pop culture. Most sci-fi fans would likely describe a story similar to this not as one of an unlived life, but as an inner light type story. Rick and Morty probably depicts my favorite riff on the idea, reducing the general premise of the inner light and making it into an arcade game about living the entire life of a guy named Roy.
Hey Roy, you pull those Persian off-white shags for the clearance sale? Whoa. Shit! Oh, what the hell?
Thrash your Roy score. If we had the technology to do what the Resicans did, we'd probably make it into a game like that. Picard never goes back to the carpet store. Neither do I. That's the difference between you and me, Morty.
Earl Grey never fails.
Earl Grey never fails. And I guess I just can't play the entire episode, can I? So I'll settle on 2 quotes that really get me right good. He's not a family man, and Picard's long arc to becoming someone who could be one is paid homage in this episode when Picard as Kamin talks about his children. As he says,
I always believed that I didn't need children to complete my life. Now I couldn't imagine life without them.
And then there's Picard Kamin's words to his daughter, which sound like a prelude to his words to Riker at the end of Star Trek Generations, as he says,
Seize the time, Maribor. Live now. Make now always the most precious time. Now will never come again.
Earl Grey never fails. And remember, put your shoes away.
You've been brooding behind that flute all evening.
I'm not brooding. I'm immersed in my music.
Will the events of this episode have anything to do with the future of Trek? Very likely they will. The use of the Resican flute in the main theme of Star Trek Picard shows that this is not an experience that Jean-Luc ever forgot, which was the whole point. He likely still has the flute, and it's something that he could definitely bust out in future seasons of Picard. I would be very surprised if he didn't.
Seize the time, Maribor.
His lessons here about seizing the moment certainly came into play after this episode, and they lean into the themes of time and mortality that played a big part of Picard's first season. When it comes to making the most of the time you have to remember, crush your watch! Crush your watch! Yep, she's in this episode and proves pivotal at keeping Picard alive and attached to the probe. Surely living in the now and seizing the moment includes giving in to the obvious love between you and your soulmate. If so, then get moving, Jean-Luc. Move along home. Come on!
Hailing frequencies open.
Our hailing frequencies are now open. Feel free to share your thoughts on the Inner Light, Resican Society, the Unlived Life, the Carpet Store, Flutes, and anything else. One viewer writes, Shran! I could not possibly agree more. Another viewer writes, thought the thumbnail said WAP Factor, LOL. Did it not? Which show is this? The Trek show or the one people have to pay for? That's the Trek show. Yeah, that's what I thought. Star Trek! I keep coming back to the title of this episode. It's the inner light of the planet that ultimately destroyed the Resicans. Kind of, it's a bit of a stretch. But their own inner light survived, and it was transferred into Picard. Whether he says it out loud or not, it never left him, and the emotions and brilliance of this episode likely never leaves anyone who watches it. This episode and the timeless story that it tells is an inner light to everyone, one that we'll never forget. Now will never come again. So here's to now.